Comedy is an incredibly subjective form of communication, as personal as art itself. Across time and culture, humor has been the bleeding edge of self-expression, constantly evolving to counter people's expectations and question their comfort level. We can like some jokes and dislike others, but given how comedy is explicitly context-dependent, could anyone truly claim they know the right way to be funny? Yes, I do. I have 3 qualifications to justify this claim. 1, I made semi-professional internet sketch comedy during the least profitable time period to do so, after Vine, but before TikTok. This is part of a larger pattern of doing things at the wrongest possible moment, like releasing the finale of a Newgrounds series about the Fable franchise in 2018, assembling a large team for a D&D channel a month before COVID, or transitioning now. If we can extrapolate anything from this information, it's that my life is a satire. 2, I grew up reading Calvin and Hobbes. This made me a genius. Only the most dedicated overachievers of my generation were able to appreciate the complex, multi-layered comedy of counterculture rebel icon Bill Watterson. As a result of owning and reading the full box set, I was constantly complimented for my impressive vocabulary, placed in multiple academic programs for gifted children, graduated with a bachelor's degree 2 years earlier than my peers, and now can't buy groceries unless it's the only thing I do that day. 3, I'm incredibly pretentious. My standards are impossibly high, and I've rewritten the last 3 paragraphs about 12 times. Not only do I believe there's an optimal way to be funny, but I can and do correct people's comedic timing in my head down to the millisecond anytime they fail to tell a joke properly. If you go so far as to repeat a common internet catchphrase like you just came up with it yourself and then stare at me until I laugh, I will purge your existence from my memory. Comedy is like music. There's a mathematical rhythm, an expected flow, and a correct way to break the rules and catch people off guard. If you focus too much on the expected structure, you can easily wind up feeling as formulaic as a generic pop song or another mockumentary workplace sitcom. But if you stray too far off the beaten path, you could end up in the random nonsense territory of an Adam Sandler movie, the comedy equivalent of experimental ska. Reading the room, nailing the timing, outlasting cultural shifts while also speaking to the moment. Comedy is a skill. Everyone wants to be funny, but it takes a lifetime of dedication to write masterpieces like most of Arrested Development, or half of Community, or maybe like 3 SNL sketches. But most people haven't learned how to do it right, and they sometimes try anyway, resulting in the easiest and lowest form of comedy possible, the spoof.
Watch out! Move! Move!
Spoofs are comedic imitations of existing stories or genres. In theory, they are funny. But in practice, they're like if you left a script in front of a group of 13-year-old boys and then just produced it without checking to see what adjustments they made when you weren't in the room. They're what happens when you hired the self-described funny guy from The Office to make a summer comedy as quickly as possible. Spoofs allow someone to call themselves a comedy writer by pointing at something that recently happened and going, hey, remember when that thing happened? It was so funny how that thing happened. This kind of simple observational comedy isn't a pitfall to be avoided, it's just the first step on the comedy writing journey, and moving beyond it takes the same patience and practice that you'd put into any artistic skill. That's why every internet sketch channel consists primarily of video game parodies and always will. But fear not, because today, I have condensed 10 years of experience into a single video. Heed my advice, and you may just rise above the common jesters and their screwball knockbusters, perhaps one day even reaching the lofty heights of door monster sketch comedy. Ooh. Okay, I'm gonna need to rethink some things. Pause! We have a patreon.com/doormonster. It has an entire library of exclusive content that you can only get on patreon.com/doormonster. Me and Alice just released a new episode of History Flunkies, the podcast where we don't know anything about history and try to remember it despite our American educations. And all donations go towards helping us pay our team so that we can keep making these videos. Patreon.com/doormonster. Thank you, that is all. Okay, so I've always viewed spoofs as a sloppy and unsophisticated form of comedy, barely worthy of sharing the title, and I've long strived to reach greater heights in my own writing. But upon closer inspection, it would appear that I have in fact largely built my success within the subgenre, and that is not good for my ego, so I feel the need to draw some distinctions. After all, putting Hot Fuzz in the same category as Spaceballs hardly seems fair. So clearly we're dealing with a spectrum. While I think that the genre definitely creates space for some of the most embarrassingly bad movies anyone's ever been subjected to, there are examples that far exceed these expectations, crossing over into the far superior realm of character-driven comedy. With that in mind, I have devised the 3 tiers of parody films: low-effort spoofs, high-effort spoofs, and transformative spoofs. By comparing these categories, we should be able to determine exactly what makes comedy good or bad and what to avoid in our own writing. We'll start with the category that stokes my hatred the most. Low-effort spoofs are largely defined by their disposable nature. These are not movies created with the intention to last. They are the projects that you rush out to get a passing grade for the morning gen ed class that you forgot you were taking. We're talking scary movie, disaster movie, epic movie, superhero movie. They're not even invested enough to come up with a clever title. It's just a description of the thing they're making fun of, or the title of another movie with one word changed to something kind of inappropriate, like The Hungover Games. As the title suggests, it's going to be all the tropes of that movie, except... again.
I think I have superpowers. I just want to be like everybody else.
That isn't what your parents wanted for you.
You're not my father.
But with a comedic twist.
We gonna get fame, money.
Don't forget the bitches.
Ha! Yeah, wait, was that a joke? They said it like a joke. Timeless comedy is hard to write because it first requires an actual understanding of storytelling. You have to create an environment that aids in the setup and delivery of a joke, otherwise you're just saying a funny thought, and we have stand-up for that. If you're making a movie, you still need to craft an experience for your audience, and then you can highlight the absurdity within it. But who wants to do all that work when somebody else already did it for you?
I can't dance. I wear black pants. My middle name's Lance. My grandma's from France.
That was a scene from Scary Movie 3, referencing a scene from a biographical drama that came out a year earlier called 8 Mile. And by referencing, I mean they shot the exact same scene, but changed the lyrics and had the guy unknowingly do very racist things. This is what we call Michael Scott humor.
Plenty of space in the parking lot, but the little cars go in the compact spot. Spot! Spot! Spot!
This kind of spoof is a problem for numerous reasons, but what sets it apart is that it relies on the audience having external information to be able to understand the joke. It parasitically capitalizes on your appreciation of the source material, but then fails to transform or add value to that shared memory. Remove it from its context, and all you've got left is whatever observational humor they've tacked on, which in this case is that sometimes white people be accidentally racist. So wacky when they do that. The jokes themselves also have no connective tissue between them. They're effectively doing a bunch of non sequitur gags inside a familiar package. But good comedy builds on itself and weaves a thematic thread through each punchline to tie them into the larger scene. This style of low-effort spoof is a big part of the early 2000s film scene, and it has survived to the internet via Newgrounds, YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram. It's easy and cheap to produce, and it's always the exact same formula.
Before that,
Fourscore.
you were Abraham Lincoln?
Abe Lincoln parody artist. And 7 beers ago.
It's funny.
That was actually a joke making fun of the formula from a Britannic sketch. They're one of my favorites. I just wanted to mention them. I'm being told by my other writers to clarify that you aren't inherently wrong for enjoying these kinds of movies or videos. They can be good for a cheap laugh. It's the Taco Bell of entertainment. Perfect for when you want something immediately satisfying, don't want to think too hard, and are a little bit high. And at the very least, these movies are an effective way to learn narrative writing tropes. The beats of the genre are laid bare and beaten to death, and you can now better identify them and decide how they should or shouldn't play into your own writing. That said, my god, are they terrible? I hate these kinds of comedies so much. A joke requires a setup and a punchline, and a low-effort spoof leaves out the setup entirely, putting the burden on us to bring one along, like a friend who invites you to a party but asks if you can bring the alcohol because they don't have any. And because the writers didn't do any of the work to set up for the joke, the punchlines aren't even funny. They feel like the placeholders that they threw into the script for now and then never bothered to change. And then one thing leads to another, and they get hired to direct an HBO adaptation of Baldur's Gate 3 for some reason.
What if he had a catchphrase that was like an anti-catchphrase?
Like if every time he entered the room, he was like, "What's up, bitches?" But not that, because that's horrible. Put that in. Put all this in.
All it takes to rise above this base level of impulsive schlock is to make your story self-contained, retelling it as if nobody has seen the things you're referencing, and establishing a standard to then be made fun of. This elevates your writing to the second category, a high-effort spoof. These are likely what you think of when you try to remember what a spoof is. Airplane, Top Secret, Holy Grail, Men in Tights. While each of these movies still rely on parodying a specific genre or trope, they are able to stand on their own even when that source material has been forgotten. Airplane is an adaptation of the movie 0 Hour, by which I mean they almost one-to-one remade 0 Hour and just exaggerated everything into a live-action Looney Tunes episode while maintaining the somber disaster movie tone.
A break! Hold the red handle!
I just want to tell you both good luck. We're all counting on you.
And you might think that's the same thing that happened in Scary Movie 3, but it's not. First off, Airplane is remaking an entire self-contained movie, which means Airplane is also a self-contained movie. All of their jokes are built around this central narrative, and so even when they make external references, that's not what's holding the scene together, it's just a bonus. This scene is referencing another movie called Saturday Night Fever, but the jokes don't rely on you having seen the original to land properly. There's plenty happening on screen that is just funny. And the fact that you might recognize the reference is icing. What makes these movies and their respective categories different is that the jokes all feed off each other and play into what the story is already telling us. In this airplane scene, we're told this is a dangerous establishment, and to support that, we not only see two people get into a fight, but they're Girl Scouts. Another person gets very obviously stabbed and nobody notices. The violence continues through the cartoonishly ridiculous dance scene, becoming integrated into the spectacle. This is a principle I'm dubbing illogical consistency, because even if the jokes themselves are not grounded in logic, they follow a consistent pattern and goal that you can trace, in direct contrast to the pure disconnected randomness of Scary Movie 3. This is something I've tried to do with all of our sketches to varying levels of success. I had no expectation that most people were going to have played Paradox's Empire of Sin when I made that video, so I leaned into making fun of a larger genre tropes of old mafia movies, and also doing a funny voice, things that were universally humorous. And then if you happen to have played the game, you also notice that I'm talking about specific events or illogical mechanics. We can see how much of a difference this makes even comparing trailers, like the one for Top Secret, which is dated and doesn't explain anything about the story, but contains full setups and punchlines just within its few selected clips, versus the Hungover games, which again is real and very terrible and makes absolutely no sense at all, unless you happen to be familiar with every stupid surface level reference they decided to include for some reason. There's also a difference in the literal effort put into the gags in these movies. Low effort spoofs are cheap to make because self-aware dialogue doesn't take long to write or perform, but artists spare no expense for even the tiniest of jokes. High effort spoofs are the ones so filled with visual puns and background gags that you can always find something new every time you rewatch. In Top Secret's final fight, the protagonist and antagonist engage in a Western style brawl, complete with a full saloon and multiple extras. It's also entirely underwater. Not only is this scene funny through the sheer commitment to the bit, but you hardly even notice the bartender in the background drying the saloon glasses with a towel. It takes a common trope of the genre and uses it to support and elevate an already absurd premise. For a modern example, Community frequently dedicates entire episodes to parodying specific movies or genres, and it often calls itself out like a low-effort spoof would, but they elevate the meta-reference by giving in-character context for what they're doing, and by putting crazy amounts of effort into properly imitating their source material, basically treating each episode as its own film instead of sticking to an easy, repeatable formula. Even Spaceballs, despite its low-effort title, rises just above the sludge of its peers by not relying solely on being a Star Wars parody. Its plot follows similar beats and has characters who are very clear stand-ins for their counterparts, but its jokes are able to stand on their own, even when they're borrowing from other sources, like using an Alien reference and a check please to drive home a bit about untrustworthy diner food. And this might all seem really obvious, like a joke works better if your audience knows what you're talking about. That's the kind of insight you can only get from a washed-up independent sketch comic turned video essayist. And yet there are 6 scary movies, so clearly this isn't common knowledge. Comedy is still often considered a trivial, artistically unimportant sideshow compared to much deeper and more meaningful dramas. But if we considered its potential as a test for whether or not someone can be trusted to create more emotionally challenging works of art, then that Craig guy I made a whole video about because he destroyed every female character in The Last of Us might not be running an adaptation of my favorite video game because he wrote Scary Movie 3. Spoofs are ultimately a shortcut, even the high effort ones, because they're always using someone else's work as a crutch. That is until they use their source material as a stepping stone to create something new. That's where we see the third category, the transformative spoof. That seems like the perfect time to tell you about World Anvil, the sponsor of today's video, and an amazing tool that I think you would love to have, because if you're watching this video, you probably haven't finished your novel, or you have a big D&D session coming up and you're procrastinating. World Anvil is a world-building, writing, and game-mastering desktop software made by people who actually know how to make that process easier. It comes with a whole suite of tools to help you write, organize, or even present and publish your outrageously complex setting and characters. Tools like plot templates, interactive maps, custom timelines, family trees and relationship charts, diplomacy webs, and it can all be cross-linked, updated, and organized in real time. And if you're a game master, it also comes with over 100 supported systems, tools to plan and present your campaigns, including a full campaign manager and digital storyteller screen, plus templates for custom NPCs, locations, and plots. Honestly, there are so many features, I don't have time to list them all off. Several members of our production team use World Anvil for their D&D games and absolutely love it. If you want to try it out for your own writing and support this channel in the process, you can use the link in the description to go to worldanvil.com and use the code DoorMonster, and you can get 51% off any yearly membership. Thank you so much to World Anvil for sponsoring, and let's get back to the comedy rants. The movies in this category are the furthest from what we would traditionally define as a spoof. Some of them barely even count. These comedies may be satirizing or parodying some well-known genre or trope, but they've gone so far beyond them that they create an entirely new experience and often encourage a reformation of the genre they're making fun of.
How's looked? He's in the freezer. Just say cool off. No, I didn't say anything, actually. Shame.
Hot Fuzz barely registers as a parody because it's structurally a standalone cop movie. It's an original story, all of its humor is self-contained and character-driven, and it references cliches from other cop movies as a framing device for its relatively grounded protagonist to interact with and deconstruct. Nicholas Angel is a straight-laced, by-the-book, no-nonsense city cop who is transferred to a small village where seemingly nothing ever happens. He's introduced to his new partner, who is obsessed with American cop movies, and the two of them have to uncover a mysterious murderer within this community, which increasingly beckons him to embrace his inner loose cannon. Angel initially dismisses the movie tropes as unrealistic, even while living his life through that lens. His mundane daily tasks and police paperwork are even edited with the cinematic language of action scenes. He teaches his partner how to be a better officer while in turn learning to let loose when his own rules fail him, and his education in action tropes is narratively rewarded when the larger-than-life murder cabal turns out to be real and he's left with no other options. Not only is the juxtaposition of these movie references and this idyllic setting hilarious, it re-energizes these tired, familiar moments by grounding them and making them feel almost believable. Rather than just being a reference to things we've seen before, this is all included in the narrative and the motivations of these characters. They imitate the very action movies they were teasing, while still upholding their established ethos of being good police officers. They manage to do the entire fight without killing anyone, and they end the movie with a paperwork montage. The most effective example of the transformative spoof might be the first Scream, which came out long after the heyday of slasher films. Iconic horror monsters like Freddy and Chucky had begun spouting one-liners as their lore got more and more convoluted, and they descended from terrifying killers to campy cartoon villains.
Oh, shit. What do you know? To beat my high score.
So how did Scream, a parody of slasher movies, adapt to the absurdity of its source material? Well, it created a world previously unseen in the horror genre, one where the characters had seen horror movies. By now, the meta-nature of Scream has become a tired trope all on its own, but when it was first released, having characters who were fully aware of and using the tropes of the genre to survive caught people completely off guard. It actually revitalized horror itself, pulling it out of a nosedive by playing with the audience's expectations and becoming one of the highest-grossing movies of the year. I'm not even sure it makes sense to have on this list, because it's not a comedy. It has comedy in it, but it's just a really good example of somebody knowing and loving their source material, perfectly understanding their audience's expectations of it, and transforming it into an effective original story. Comedy wasn't what was needed to build on this genre because it was already not taken seriously enough, so all they could have done there was mimic the stupid half-assed slashers people had come to expect.
I'm in the house. Do you know where I am? I could be anywhere. I'm like the wind, baby.
I can see your feet.
This is why comedy feels so important to me. It's not a lesser writing skill than drama, it's just easier to pick apart because it's more obvious when it's bad. And mastering it is evidence that you can write other, easier to elicit emotions. Comedy unforgivingly requires a full understanding of narrative, a lived experience with a wide range of human perspectives, and the empathy to predict your audience's reactions. Not only isn't it trivial, it's the ultimate measuring stick of someone's writing abilities. Making someone uncomfortable or sad or angry requires very little finesse. The news does those things all day, but to make someone laugh, you have to be paying attention. You have to care what your audience is thinking and feeling. But clearly, the studio executives over at HBO haven't picked up on this because, again, I'm not sure I've said this enough, the writer of superhero movie, Scary Movies 3 and 4, and The Hangover Parts 2 and 3, vocal sexist and zombie enthusiast Craig Mazin has been hired to make a Baldur's Gate show. And if you asked me in the year 2003, hey, do you think the writer of the third installment of the famously bottom-of-the-barrel spoof series might be equipped to adapt a high-fantasy epic loved for its character-driven comedy and deeply painful personal drama? I'd have said, I'm not sure because I'm 11, but probably not. A writer's sense of humor isn't just some casual preference completely separated from their understanding of the world. It's a direct reflection of exactly how they see themselves and other people. If somebody writes misogynist, bigoted, or ignorant comedy, it's because they at least were those things at the time of writing, and the chances that they're going to later on nail realistic representations of experiences they haven't had or people they don't understand are quite low.
My God, he stabbed her! Not her! My pronouns are they, them. He stabbed them!
And lacking that basic amount of empathy is truly, honestly, so boring. Let's take a moment to define what comedy is, because it would appear that some people forgot. There have been a few theories over the years about why humans laugh at things. One theory from the early modern period was that laughter expressed feelings of superiority over another person, like when they trip and fall down, and you're very happy it wasn't you. Another from the late 1800s was that laughter was a release of pent-up nervous energy left over from other more rational emotions, like when you get pranked real hard and then you laugh because you punched your brother in his face. Both these theories leave a lot unaccounted for, like puns or word games or videos of silly cats. The most robust theory is that laughter is a response to something our minds perceive as absurd or contrary to what was previously set up. It's very complicated and barely worth getting into, because the dudes who came up with these were absolutely the least funny people in human history. But I think that last theory is pointing in the right direction. Things aren't funny unless they're unexpected. The point of comedy is to share a unique perspective on something we're all apathetically familiar with, and to make it easily digestible. It's the most raw possible form of communicating your perspective to another person.
Sometimes I feel like I was born with a leak, and any goodness I started with just slowly spilled out of me, and now it's all gone, and I'll never get it back in me. It's too late.
Don't be sad. Good horsey.
BoJack Horseman delivers some of the most honest, direct commentary I've ever heard on the exploitation of the film industry, complicated relationships with terrible people, self-hatred, addiction, death, guilt, forgiveness, irreversible consequences of your actions, and we're able to watch it without doubling over in pain because they turn everything problematic into an animal pun, like Quentin Tarantino. And they make all the characters who are dealing with these things comedic stand-ins who we can watch from a safe distance and digest at our own pace, because hey, it's just a joke. I lean on comedy because addressing my feelings head-on in a public art form feels cringy as hell, so it's the only way I can allow myself to be honest. I can have a caricature of myself deliver a self-hating monologue to an irreverent clone, and it's funny because it's all part of this absurd fiction instead of just the actual conversation constantly happening in my head, which would be a bummer. If we can all agree that the ease of dismissing comedy is the reason it's so effective in the first place, then it becomes incredibly simple to boil it down to the actual skill and perspective on display. And when those are comparable to that kid in your class who would drink mayonnaise for attention, that's bad comedy. But worry not, if you have any self-awareness whatsoever, you too can turn your painful experiences and horrifying observations into comedy gold. Here's how. These tips are going to be in regards to writing narrative comedy, adding humor to a good story, or else a good story into your collection of jokes if you'd prefer to put way too much effort into comedy sketches that will receive medium to low views. Tip number 1, make it self-contained. Referencing something that everybody already knows is easy, and it's great for cracking jokes with your friends during D&D games. There's plenty of value to connecting with people on shared experiences and cultural knowledge, and it can even be fine to include that in your narrative writing. But relying on it brings fleeting results. If your jokes only function thanks to presumed shared knowledge, they're going to fall flat for anyone outside of that bubble, which can happen just from the passage of time. So if you're intentionally trying to write lasting comedy into your narrative, you need to either recreate the setup you assume everybody already knows, or make sure the meta-knowledge isn't essential to understanding or enjoying your writing. It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia is constantly inspired by and referring to real-world events, trends, and pop culture, but its humor is always centered around these irredeemable idiots misinterpreting those things, hurting themselves, and ruining each other's lives. lives. It's been running for over 20 years, and the earliest episodes still haven't lost relevance because being relevant was never the point. Compare that to Family Guy, which is shockingly also still on the air, but is borderline unwatchable because the humor was based on a bunch of non sequitur references to things that are now boring or long forgotten. Removing those, we're left with a stagnant cast of insufferable characters, but unlike Always Sunny, we're the victims here. It's not that jokes relying on outside knowledge can't be funny, just that they can't be timeless, and will always have a limited, short-lived audience. Tip number 2, use comedy to define and strengthen your characters. Even if you're writing an absurdist genre spoof, you're still writing a story. You still want your audience to empathize with your characters, and they are your vehicles for sharing your perspective. When the joke is that some cosmically bad luck befalls an unwitting buffoon, that's an opportunity to tell us that this character is unlucky or self-sabotaging, and you can show us who they are through their reaction to that situation. If you want to make jokes about the absurdity of over-the-top machismo, you can build an entire character around that theme, including both comedic and genuine moments of consequences and introspection. If it feels real, the hits will be that much funnier. Even in something like Monty Python and the Holy Grail, we remember the specific characters and their personalities because the comedy is character-specific. King Arthur is brash and brave, and he confidently demands what he wants while pretending to have a horse. The Black Knight is so stubborn that he doesn't even give up after his limbs have all been cut off. Bedivere is clever and successfully argues a bunch of peasants out of burning a woman for being a witch, only to have it backfire because this world isn't logical or forgiving. We're told who they are through their unique antics, and those personalities in turn inspire further comedy. Tip number 3, put in some damn effort. At this point, you might already be thinking, I don't know if I can do this. I'm just not funny enough. Doesn't matter, you're not doing improv. You have all the time in the world to figure it out, and that's enough. Treat it like an art, or a skill you're developing, or a project that you want to turn out a specific way. Test jokes, workshop them, rewrite them, run them by your friends to get their reaction before finalizing anything. Being funny is learnable, and when it comes to writing narrative comedy, you don't have to be the funny one in the friend group, you just have to put in the work. You know who's funny? Not me. I'm actually not a comedian. I'm a perfectionist, and comedy is my special interest. I nitpick every single line of our sketches. I rewrite them so many times. I read them out loud to see how they sound. I imagine them being delivered in other people's voices. I write dumb internet sketch comedy like I'm crafting a magic spell, as if speaking even a single word out of place will have devastating consequences. But in real life, I can barely express my feelings. I'm reading this off a teleprompter because I was rewriting it at 3 in the morning to make sure I say it all right. And you can do that too. Tip number 4, change your perspective. If you don't naturally think in comedy, you can. When I was writing sketches every week, the hardest part was constantly coming up with something new. Whenever I tried to just sit down and think of something, it never worked. So I had to retrain myself to start seeing jokes and sketch scenarios everywhere around me. My wife and I see a Ouija board at a game store and have a lighthearted argument about whether demons are real. That's a sketch. I watch Daredevil and laugh about how he finishes every fight by slamming his face into the ground. That's also a sketch. One time, I was moving into a new house and some security system salesman ducked under the mostly closed door of my garage and entered my home while I was cleaning, and then he tried to sell me an ADT security system. And I was so mad about it that I swore a lifelong vendetta against salesmen, and then I made a sketch about that too. You have to intentionally remind yourself over and over again to reframe your view of the world around you. Observe things from different angles, and then write them down, even if you don't know where that joke goes yet. You might find the perfect place in some future scripts. Actual comedy is a reinterpretation of the things we all have to deal with every day. We can see people's perspectives through their comedy because that's what comedy is. Someone seeing something in a way we've never considered. It's only subjective the same way art is subjective, and that it's most useful for communicating highly personal thoughts and feelings in the hope that others might learn something, relate, or feel seen. Following this advice, even a spoof can transcend being a simple reference and instead become something timeless that stands on its own. Has all of this been a way to make myself feel better about spending the better part of my 20s making nearly 300 comedy sketches about movies and video games that are no longer relevant? Perhaps. Are spoofs actually a valuable way to hone your skills and learn basic storytelling techniques? I think I've come around, and I have to say yes. Could all of this really be my own subjective opinion on what is honestly an ever-evolving and inherently timeless art, whose true value is dependent on each individual's personal experience? No, I'm right. Thank you for watching me ramble about comedy for a while. That was almost entirely just me ranting. That was it. That's where that came from. Thank you to Cass and Chris and Olive, as usual, for helping make this video happen. We're gonna have another one in 2 weeks. In the meantime, please be sure to check out our Patreon if you're enjoying these videos. We have an entire library of exclusive content over there. We're adding to it regularly. We've got new stuff coming out pretty soon. At this point, there should also be a new AMA with Matlock available on my second personal channel, which I'll link in the description. We also do do semi-daily live streams over at twitch.tv/doormonstertv. It's a morning show where me and my wife just get up and stream and talk about random nonsense, mostly that we found on Reddit or just that we want to rant about that day. It's a fun hangout, and then after you're done, you can go to our Discord server, which is also linked in the description, and hang out with everybody else who is in the stream chat and who watches these videos. Thank you for watching this one, and I will see you next time. I should figure out a video on this. There is zero inherent value to a spoof movie.
Hot Fuzz is a spoof movie.
Okay, maybe I changed my mind.